So I'd like to begin the program this evening, if it's okay. Uh, Sam, with your work, is that good?
Oh, you broke up. Were you talking to me, Cyan?
Yes.
Yes, we can start with me if you'd like.
Okay. Sorry,
No
but
problem. Can everyone hear me okay?
Mhm.
Awesome. All right. So I wrote an article for Southern Maryland Magazine, and it's called Invisible Does Not Mean Imaginary. 5 years ago, I had the privilege of gracing the cover of Southern Maryland Woman Magazine for my activism with mental health awareness. In that photo, I was wearing a black dress and was standing on my own 2 feet. There was no wheelchair, central line in my chest, or nasal cannula helping me breathe. So what happened? In a wild turn of events, everything I thought I knew about my body and mind changed. I was misdiagnosed. How could this happen? How could doctors miss my genetic illness and several other comorbidities? I don't doubt for a second that medical bias was to blame. My former doctors frequently parroted out phrases commonly heard by young women. You're too young to be sick. You look fine to me. And you're just anxious. Despite the range of strange symptoms, doctors told me that my problems were likely psychosomatic, even with abnormal test results. For most of my life, I was misdiagnosed as being mentally ill. But that wasn't true. I was physically sick because I was born ill. I just didn't know. For as long as I can remember, I've had pains in my stomach, back, and head, everywhere. The thing is, I thought the discomforts I felt in my body were normal. I cried inconsolably every day in my first month of life because my stomach was not absorbing my mother's breast milk. As a result, I was not gaining weight. As a 5-year-old, I had such dramatic nosebleeds that my clothes would look like evidence from a crime scene. At around 8 or 9 years old, I developed an aversion to food. The stomach pains I would get when eating further exacerbated the perfect storm in developing anorexia at such a young age. I moved from the US Virgin Islands to Southern California, which was a significant culture shock. Being the new brown girl who looked different and even spoke differently made me the target of bullying. I now know that the trauma I experienced in adjusting to a new culture and being bullied was not the only thing that contributed to my eating disorder as a child. As I went into puberty, I started having recurrent bladder infections and strep throats several times a year and quickly caught common viruses. And even though I had the flu vaccine, I would still get the flu almost every year. Always being sick was such a regular thing for me. But when I did bring it up to medical professionals as a teenager, it was dismissed. As I entered adulthood, my health issues worsened. I spent several years visiting neurologists who would perform 1 or 2 tests, give up, or diagnose me with migraines. I had some luck when one found that I was having partial Jacksonian seizures and had an 8 millimeter brain lesion. But my doctors didn't know why. They thought I had MS, but the results were inconclusive, and they gave up after that. I had a gynecologist who performed exploratory surgery and found that I had endometriosis. However, her inexperience with endometriosis caused it to spread to my bowels, bladder, and appendix. Endocrinologists even discovered a small pituitary tumor on my pituitary gland. And with all that information and my symptoms, no medical professional thought to check for systemic conditions. Instead, they told me that even with those things, I still looked healthy. It wasn't until I ended up in the ICU following life-threatening complications from a second endometriosis surgery, the doctors realized that my body wasn't like everyone else's. Within weeks, I became a wheelchair and oxygen user and got my first central venous catheter, also known as a chest port. Although it seemed sudden to people outside of my immediate circle, this decline had been going on for years, and the months prior were particularly hectic. I had lost more than 30 pounds in 6 months and would sometimes sit on the floor at work because I would feel faint. Suddenly, everything I had been experiencing for more than 2 decades made sense. At 29 years old, I was finally diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, an autoimmune autonomic ganglionopathy/dysautonomia. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, EDS, is a genetic connective tissue disease. Since everything in our body is constructed of connective tissue, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a recipe for bodily disaster. Simply put, my body is like a house made with poor materials. Even though the floor was creaking and the roof was leaking, it looked great on the outside. However, over time, the house made with faulty materials will eventually fall apart. The floor will give out, the electrical lines and plumbing will fail, and it will no longer function. In essence, my body is a poorly built house. Many of the comorbidities that I have directly result from having defective DNA. The autoimmune autonomic ganglionopathy, AAG, is likely related to my genetic illness. AAG is an extremely rare form of dysautonomia. It causes my immune system to attack my autonomic nervous system, affecting functions like digestion, respiration, heart rhythm, and dozens of other things we don't consciously think about. As you can imagine, it is relatively common for neurological conditions to affect behavior and mental health. Sadly, mental illness, misdiagnosis in physically ill women is not uncommon. Implicit medical bias about a person's age, race, gender, disability, sexual orientation, identity, and even mental health status leads to prolonged suffering, post-traumatic stress, and even death. An alarming 30 to 50% of women diagnosed with mental health issues really had a physical health condition. The psychological diagnosis delayed an accurate diagnosis up to 14 times more than if they had been misdiagnosed with a physical illness. These statistics are even higher among women with an underlying neurological condition. Once a mental health diagnosis is on your chart, the likeliness of being dismissed massively increases. Mental health stigma prevents medical professionals from seeing the patient as a whole person and minimizes any physical distress as a plea for attention or a complication of an unhealthy mind. Frankly, mental health stigma is dangerous to everyone, even if we don't suffer from a mental illness ourselves. Being a young woman of color, I understand the helplessness that arises when you're begging doctors to listen. It is a fight for your life of epic proportions. The medical professionals I see now, many from top research hospitals, do not believe that I ever had an anxiety disorder, borderline personality disorder, or even major depression. The licensed psychologist I have now been seeing for nearly 3 years disagrees with the labels I was given. I was diagnosed with those conditions after only 1 or 2 visits with a psychiatrist and then was pumped full of pills that never worked. Mental health conditions typically take months to diagnose. Still, I was diagnosed immediately after talking about dissociation, mood swings, irritation, feelings of doom, and severe anxiety, which are common in neurological conditions. Instead, my psychologist believes that I am experiencing post-traumatic stress and grief from years of medical gaslighting and mistreatment. Ironically, implicit medical bias can create mental health issues that weren't present before. So what do we do about this silent epidemic of implicit medical bias? The most critical thing medical professionals can do is practice empathetic and active listening. Part of the problem is that medical students have learned that when they, quote, hear hoofbeats to think of horses, not zebras, end quote. This phrase means that when a patient comes in with symptoms, to look for the most common cause. Medical students become doctors who believe it is unlikely that zebras, those with rare conditions, will ever come into their offices. Unfortunately, rare and chronic diseases are grossly underdiagnosed because of this. Many rare conditions may not be rare. They're just rarely diagnosed. The most important thing a doctor can do is listen to their patients, and if they don't know the answer, it is their responsibility to help them find it, even if that means referring them to someone else. It is doubtful that someone is lying or exaggerating their symptoms, and making that unsubstantiated claim can have deadly results. Secondly, medical professionals must understand that illness does not have a minimum age requirement. If that were the case, children and young adults would never face illness. For perspective, 43% of children and teens have a chronic disease, so the idea that one can be too young to be sick is not rooted in fact. Third, appearance has very little to do with what is going on inside someone's body. Most people with chronic illness have an invisible disease, but invisible does not mean imaginary. American healthcare and societal views on illness and disability must change quickly. Socioeconomic status, for-profit medical systems, prejudice, mental health stigma, and ignorance make access to healthcare difficult. Substantial change only occurs when compassion and education replace stigma and bias. We also need to remember that medical professionals make mistakes. They are practicing medicine. It is okay to seek a second opinion outside of your local medical system and advocate for yourself. Keep all your records, take notes, ask questions, and request the tests you think you need. If they refuse, make sure you document that and have them write it in the records. No one knows your body better than you, and if something seems off, you're probably right. It shouldn't take nearly dying to finally be believed. I am very fortunate to now have an incredible team of doctors consisting of more than 14 specialists who not only empathetically listen to me, but also do everything in their power to assist me through my conditions. I also have an amazing home nurse who goes above and beyond each week that she sees me. There are excellent, compassionate medical professionals out there, and they're worth looking for.
Thank you, Sam. I was wondering if anybody had a question for you before we move on. Does anybody want to, just unmute themselves and ask Cyan a question, because I am interested in having a conversation. So just for a couple of minutes, somebody has a question for Cyan.
I don't really have a question. I just want to say, wow, what an amazing article. That's a really good one.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
I wanted to say the same thing. I have no question, but really appreciative of your courage in writing the article and in bringing this out. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't have a question. I also wanted to say, I wanted to say that your article hit close to home because having gone through situations where the doctors aren't doing active listening and watching that play out with my wife and her being misdiagnosed and I really appreciate you raising the awareness of the inequity in healthcare and how some people are just not believed just because of their background. So thank you for raising that up.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
I wanted to comment too. My daughter was diagnosed with MS last year, and it wasn't a definite diagnosis. I mean, the doctors looked at it and said it didn't really look like MS, but for lack of anything else, they labeled it as that
Right.
because there were lesions in the brain. But I just have to applaud the tenacity that you showed in continuing to look for answers and finding those answers. And great writing too. It was a good article.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Cheyenne, this is Diane. I wanted to also thank you for expressing your story. I definitely relate to what you're going through. Yourself is the best advocate to how you're feeling and to express that to your doctors. And my story was about, I think this year will be the third year. that I was diagnosed with hereditary hemochromatosis. My body absorbs too much iron. And the way I was able to find that out is I was expressing to my doctors that I was feeling tired and achy all the time. And when I went to my primary doctor to address those issues, they just took the normal blood panel for your physical. And then I was still having, tired and achy issues. I was telling myself I shouldn't be feeling this way. And then I went back to my endocrinologist and she did, background, more blood research. And she let me know that my iron was high. It was 300 and something. And then she said, try to eliminate your iron. I'm thinking, how is that possible when the iron is almost in anything like sugar and salt? So I tried, and she redid the testing again and went down in the 200s. And then she told me to see a hematologist, and he did more blood testing. And that's how I found out about the hereditary hemochromatosis. And I had to get my immediate family tested and found out that my parents are both carriers of the gene. So I have both copies, one copy for my mom and one copy for my dad. And my brother doesn't have it at all. And what I have to do is I have to go to the infusion center at the hospital to give a pint of blood, was what I started with. And then it was just too much for my body at the time. And then they cut it back down to half a pint of blood. So right now I'm currently under maintenance. Getting ready to go see the hematologist soon to see where my levels are at. And it's still a fluctuation, either being anemic or too much iron, because the last time I had saw him that I was anemic, and that the symptoms are kind of the same, that you're feeling tired and achy. So it's trying to balance between not being over too much or going below. So I just wanted to express that. I wanted to thank you for sharing your story and understanding again to when you're starting to feel not yourself, just to really have that voice, as you mentioned, to express that to your doctors.
Well, I'm proud of you for being tenacious yourself and continuing to seek answers, because it's not easy when they keep saying I don't know. So
Mhm.
I hope you get at least some relief and control over it, and good luck. I know how hard it is.
Thank you. Yes, I'm really fortunate to find it as soon as I did, because if you don't catch the iron, it affects your organs, and I do have some liver damage, but so far so good. I was able to, thankfully, again, catch it in time. Yeah, so thank you so much again.
Yep, Cyan's story, life story, creates a discussion that connects to other people and makes people reflect upon their own lives and the lives of those around them. Then I think that's a good thing. So that's why we keep doing this. Thank you so much, Cyan. Cyan is one of my students, whom I've never met because it's online. I've met her via Zoom, like now, as you all are meeting her. But I've never hugged her, which I wish I could, for the gift that she shared with each one of us this evening. Thank you, Cyan.
Thank you. I'll give you a virtual hug.
Okay.
Can I make a quick comment as well? Thank you so much, Cyan, for speaking your truth and your story. And I think, like Wayne was saying, having that bravery in speaking your story, I think it helps other people and connect with their own experiences. Especially, it's such a major problem with the inequity in the medical establishment, in addition to how Western medicine views us as parts of a whole instead of a whole. And I there's so much to say, but I really appreciate your story. Thank you, and your strength.
Thank you. Well said too.
Okay. I've got a list of writers and photographers who are going to present this evening. And I don't have a particular order. And so I'm just going to go from one person to the next. And as I see on my screen, Doug Rollins, who gave us the gift of his words this semester by visiting the college virtually. So Doug, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of your poetry with us.
Thanks, thanks, Neil. Yeah, I was very moved by Sean's story as well. And you made me think of, I'm a veteran of the American War in Vietnam, and the case of Agent Orange haunted us for years and years and years. The VA denied it. Guys were coming up with symptoms. They were having children born with horrible deformities, and people just couldn't figure out what was going on. And they kept on denying. In fact, a couple of guys wrote a book entitled "Waiting for an Army to Die." And our impression was they just wanted to keep on putting us out, putting it off until we finally just left the planet. But it was because of a nurse in Chicago, I believe, Wayne maybe could help me with this, who stood up for us, right? And just really advocated for us and pushed and pushed and pushed. And so now it's recognized, and the treatments are coming for various things. So I can sympathize with what you were talking about. So thank you for sharing that wonderful story. Oh gosh, so now, all right, let me read a poem. So you want me to read 25 poems, each one an hour long? Neil, is that what you're suggesting? No, sorry. Well, let me read this poem, which is a poem that shows it, that's in your anthology, called "The Girl in the Picture." And it comes from a very iconic picture from the Vietnam War of Phan Thi Kim Phuc, who was a 9-year-old girl running from her village that was being napalmed. And so the title of the poem comes from that particular image. And I had seen this image many times. Like, I think actually I won a Pulitzer Prize, the picture itself. But the poem comes from the fact that when I read it, when I saw an article about her, it mentioned that she was 9 years old when that happened to her. And my granddaughter was 9 years old when I read that about her. So this flipped this poem. I like to tell people, that I tell my own kids this, not all poetry is autobiographical, right? So this poem started as a suicide poem, contemplating suicide, and it flipped because I read about Kim. So here's the poem. It's called "The Girl in the Picture." It begins with an aphorism from a traditional Buddhist text. The aphorism is, "Whatever you run from becomes your shadow. Whatever you run from becomes your shadow." If you're a non-vet, a survivor of sorts, she'll come for you across the decades, casting a shadow in the dying light of your dreams. Naked and 9, terror in her eyes. Of course, you'll have to ignore her if you wish to survive over the years, but then your daughters will turn 9, and then your granddaughters 9, as the shadows lengthen. So you'll have no choice on that one night, screaming down the ridge road, lights off, under a full moon. She's standing in the middle of the road, still naked and 9, terror in her eyes. Now you must stop to pick her up, to carry her back home to where she came from, to that gentle village where the forgiving and the forgiven gather at high noon. There are no shadows. There are no shadows. That's a kind of poem of remorse. I like to say I have no right to ask the Vietnamese people to forgive. I have no right to ask them for forgiveness. But if they give it, I would take it. So that's one poem from my experience. I don't know where else I can go with this. I've got other poems, perhaps, but.
Let me ask if anybody wants to ask Doug a question or make a comment about what they just heard.
Sure.
If I could, I would like to say a couple things. felt through your words, like I could feel, that pain. And I think that's really hard to do as a writer. And it's something I hope to do better as I, do more. I'm writing a fiction book right now. So I'm learning from you. And one of the things I struggle with is what you just did, is just even with so little words, you made me feel emotional. And it was amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I really do think that we as artists, and everybody on this call is an artist, right? We have to make ourselves vulnerable, right? Otherwise, the words just don't, what our artwork just doesn't resound, right? We have to be vulnerable. We have to be honest, and let the art form take us where we want to go, or where it wants to go, actually. Like I said, this poem really did not start out the way it developed, but I just let it develop. I let it run through me.
Yeah,
Doug, I think it's part of our journey as a Vietnamese American who is affected by the war. I think it's part of our journey to forgive. It's part of our healing, and you make it possible. You really help to make it possible through the work that you do in healing and compassion.
Well, I have to say, I was just 21 years old. I was this punk. I was drafted out of graduate school, and I ended up in the Army very quickly over in Vietnam. And I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And when I came back and had my own children, that's when it really got me. That's when I realized the damage that we had done was through the eyes of children. So, can I write? Let me read another one. This is a whole different angle. All right, and this is it. I'll shut up after this one. All right. Promise. This isn't. I've got a profanity, a couple of profanities in here, but I hope you're okay with that. Right? This is called Talking White Man Privileged Blues. I write for a guy named Michael McPherson, who is in an organization I belong to. Talking White Man Privileged Blues. So this white guy walks into a bar. No, wait, let's say the black guy walks into a bar, just to make it interesting, you see. There's a difference, isn't there? At least here in the land of the free. Me, I'm the white guy, privileged since birth, member of the most materially blessed subspecies ever to exist. White, male, middle-class dude, raised in mid-20th century USA, recipient of non-stares, delicious anonymity, invisible by choice, until I want something, which I usually get, seriously. But this black guy, what about him? Can't teach his daughter to ride a bike? It's too dangerous out in the streets for either one of them. Can't run in public places. Shit, can't drive through most of them. The guy behind the cash register breaks into a cold sweat when he pushes open the door. All true, but here's the catch. This system you built just for me, you can shove it up your ass. Don't want it, don't need it. It's doing me more harm than good. I don't want my purchases laced with some poor kid's blood. But what's a privileged white guy to do? Sign up for sensitivity classes, boycott America, write letters, step off the sidewalk into the streets, bleed? These are not rhetorical questions. My soul is in great need. One of the untold stories of the Vietnam War is how racist it really was. And I knew guys from New York, New Jersey, who were coming out of Vietnam and going back into places that were just as horrific as what we were through. And I was this privileged guy. I was going to go back to school and go back into my life. And these guys, not so.
I'll just say, Doug, and your poems always move me deeply. That the idea of forgiveness and being forgiven, I think the idea of being forgiven is precluded by the idea of articulating what you did that needs to be forgiven. Many people do not want to do that, do not want to live with that, do not want to articulate that. So it's part of the power of your poetry in doing that. Thank
This whole concept of moral injury that we're dealing with is older veterans. I'm 75 years old, so I'm this,
you. too.
I'm aged, right? And there's a moral injury thing, which is we finally realize after years and years and years that not just that our actions, but our inactions led to real harm. Not stopping people from doing some horrible things. Anyways, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I
Thank you
didn't,
so much. I really appreciate that.
I didn't know your work before,
Yeah, I appreciate that too.
but it resonates and it's a very important feeling to carry across to another person. So thank you. Okay, let's move on. Alan, what do you have for us? Alan King is also a renowned poet who came to the college virtually. I think it was 2 or 3 falls ago when he showed up at a reading with another poet, Jericho Brown. Jericho Brown said, I'm so scared because I see Alan King sitting in the room, and I'm not sure, like I got really nervous knowing that this wonderful poet, Alan King, is in the room. And I thought, wow.
I put it in there now.
I knew he was good. I knew he was good. And it was I forget who put me in touch with you, but I'm so happy to have you here, Alan, and I'm so happy to share your work with other people, whether in this format or in the magazine. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I'll echo what the other writer said before the reading started. I'm honored to be in the anthology in the journal. Went through it, and was just really happy to be like the company that my work is in. And it was Tim Siebels that put us in touch, and Tim Siebels was is one of my favorite writers.
That's right.
And that whole thing about Jericho, like Jericho could be a very generous person, like I don't really think Jericho is nervous. I think that it's just Jericho's way of being generous, and and I appreciated that. So I had a question, Neil. I have 3 poems in the journal. Did you want me to read all 3, or should I just read 2?
I would say all 3.
Okay.
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 All right.
Alan, can I please tell you something?
Uh-huh.
I really like that picture in the left. It's really cool.
Thank you.
I really
Thank
like
you.
it.
Thank you. That's from a Nigerian artist, Aniakan Udofia, and that's my wife and I in the painting. So thank you. Thank you. So all right, I'll just jump into these poems. So I'll just go straight through them, and then I guess afterwards, if anyone has a comment or question, we can do that. But I'll just go through these poems. I'll start with the first one. The Magician's Assistant. All you needed was a broken cap seal and a finger left of Henny, the bottle you hadn't touched yet, to know it was me. Never mind I was known to pass on beer and wine for Sprite or seltzer water. That once, when I mistook your Coke for mine, when what I tasted had a darker flavor than what the fizz promised, I spat it out. You laughed when I cried, now I'll never be alcohol free. You needed a reason to suspect me, that aha, for every empty assumption swarming your mind, anxiety stinging you. Like that time you knew I had to be gay. Why else would I fly to San Francisco during Pride Month? Never mind I was going to a workshop. that I'd never been to the West Coast, and the opportunity flashed like a gold door below arching vines, a door through which several bright paths waited to carry me to every untraveled place. You needed something to put your finger on. The sea, I told you, for every time you claim that boy ain't right. Because I read a lot, because I hung out with older men, because I wasn't eager to spill my pollen on every flower that offered their nectar. You thought you had it, your proof that always went poof before the smoke cloud and you reeling with bewilderment. Like that time you smelled weed and thought that's it before you confronted me. You with your cocky scholar's grin, as if having studied me for so long, I was no longer the trick that dumbfounded you. That was enough to puff out your chest, the way you did that night in the living room. My brother and I standing before you and mom, you watching me the entire time, pointing to the empty bottle, demanding one of us tells the truth. And then your evidence eluding you again when my brother said, sorry. So this next poem is, this is different vibe. So it's different vibe from the previous one. What's unsaid?
I love your poem. I'm not even gonna lie. That was awesome. So
Thank you. Thank you.
It
And I
really
love your
was. It
paintings.
really inspires me to write more poems. And yeah,
Well, thank you. So I'll just jump into this one. What's unsaid? Your father calls and asks you to help him order something online. He thinks it's cool that with your account, he gets next day delivery. You laugh at how he treats it, as if instead of a membership, he's talking about the television when it first came out, when those who couldn't afford it went over to their neighbors to marvel at the monochrome moving images. Then the irony snaps you back. What your parents comfortably spend would throw your family's budget into crisis. Your folks who own 3 homes and considered buying another just to have it. He's a lifetime away from the skinny 20-year-old who landed here from Trinidad with his mom and 4 sisters. The guy who worked as an electrician to pitch in with the rent. Even now, when he talks about it, he squints, watching those early years slip beyond his field of vision. So he couldn't have called just for help ordering holiday gifts, the smart scales that show your BMI and connect to your smartphone. He asked about his granddaughter who's putting her dolls down for nap time in the living room. You both laugh when he asks if your wife is behaving, and you say, for now. That laugh takes you back to a sunny place in your childhood. Those summers and winter holidays you spent lugging his work bag and running to his truck for switches and fixtures. Didn't you live for those moments in his work van, the one he bought when he left the union to start out on his own? He could imitate anyone, the racist white foreman, the other black electricians who threatened to kick his funny sounding ass. You wanted to be every bit the playboy he was. The brothers so stealth, old heads back home had him hollering at sisters for them. You laughed a lot then, only disappointed when it was time to go home. That was before he questioned you being a poet, before the insults and arguments that nearly came to blows, and the 6 months he went without talking to you. You watch your daughter painting on a table in your den before she climbs in your lap and snuggles up with a smile. That was once you resting against your dad on his bed while he flipped through the papers, reading the real estate section. Your nearly 4-year-old listening to her grandfather on speakerphone says, Papa, I love you. A dam breaks inside you when your dad's choked voice cracks back. I love you too, sweetheart. So, getting ready to jump into this last poem, but I wanted to thank Neil for the invitation and for, allowing my work to be with amongst the other writers. Work in the journal, and I just thank everyone who made time on a Friday to check us out.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I want to be honest, really.
Mhm.
That poem actually got me because it was like, it got me because my dad,
Mhm.
I had a dad, right? You know, he's kind of gone now. So, but
Sorry.
it really reminded me of my dad and really hit deep. And I love that poem so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Keep up the hard work, man.
Thank you. I'll
I love
try.
your poems. I love
I'll
your
try.
poems.
So I'll
You
get
should
it.
publish them. Like they're so good that you should honestly publish them.
Thank you. I'll try to do that.
Honestly.
So this last one is for my brother-in-law, and it's I don't usually read this poem. I don't usually talk about it, but the poem came. We were on a beach. I forget the name of the beach, but it was some beach in LA. So this one was came out of a conversation I had with my brother-in-law on a beach in LA, and so this is for him. So this is Stride. The poem is called Stride, and it's for my brother-in-law Tolu. And then there's a quote that opens the poem. So it's, when you run the marathon, you run against the distance, not against the other runners and not against the time. And that's by Haile Gebrselassie. Stride. I don't remember when it happened, he says. All I know is one day Eli put himself to bed. You watch your brother-in-law with an envy you haven't felt since you were 16. When you learned then your little brother lost his virginity before you. You remember feeling like he crossed the finish line before you started the race. Your brother far beyond the horizon of that milestone. You're just as far behind your brother-in-law, wishing you could breathe the distance to him in this full marathon called parenting. Even now, he's disappearing from your field of vision as he goes on about his kids sleeping in their rooms, while your 3-year-old holds your bedtime hostage, demanding another story, crying and jumping when you say it's sleepy time. He's taken over your California king, doing mixed martial arts in her sleep, the toddler with the elbow and knee strikes, with the jabs and overhand punches. Your bonnet donning pajama kid tests your limits when each sleepless night leaves you like a runner at mile 20, hunched over, gasping, glinting with sweat, muscles blazing. But this is just the starting line of a long distance test of patience. It's how your parents must have felt, especially your poor dad. It couldn't have been easy being the only foreigner at his job, trading barbs with the other Black electricians who riffed on his accent, and the extra shit he got from the white foreman. It couldn't have been easy trying to keep it together, verbally sparring with guys he was smarter than, then coming home to your attitude. How many times you almost broke his patience when he nearly came out of himself to give you a piece of his mind. Luckily, he never broke his stride. If you learned anything, it's enjoying small victories, even in the moments that seem hard. It's a lesson your brother-in-law takes in strides. His stories about his kids are his way of coaching you to keep running. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Those poems were awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate
Okay, so
that.
how many poems have you published?
I have lost count. I've lost count, but I've been fortunate I'm in a fortunate position where I've lost count. I mean, I'm just grateful to a lot of the journals and editors of anthologies that have made space for it. So yeah, I don't remember.
That's a good thing, honestly.
Yeah, thank you.
Not even gonna lie, I feel so inspired to do a poem right now. I'm gonna go find one of my poems I have saved. I should have one saved, and I'm gonna read it out. Might be a basic one, but we'll see.
Cool, cool, cool.
Well, I think I got it. I think I got it.
Alan, that was so nice, and it's so nice that you're here with us and sharing those poems with us. And thank you for coming this semester. And you guys can't see me; it's my lighting. It's horrible. I'm so sorry. I've been trying to adjust that, but yeah, it's I don't know why. I guess it's dark in here and I can't see it. But those were just awesome, and thank you so much. That was just those were amazing, and thank everyone for being here, and Teresa and Wayne and Doug. It's so nice to see you all again. And I don't know what Neil's plan is, but I think this would be a great time to maybe transition into some music. I don't know, Neil, what do you think?
You read my mind.
Oh, good.
That's the plan. So we're going to now have a musical interlude, which, you know, I like I said, people tell stories in their own way. And Brent Ferguson, the colleague from the college, and his student Carter, I heard of their talent. I asked them to perform for us this evening.
Yeah, can I make a suggestion? Ask everybody who isn't to mute themselves except for the person speaking or playing.
I agree. Yes.
Yes, sir. But honestly, Alan King, just thank you so much for sharing those poems. Honestly, like they were just so good.
Before Rudy, before we move to the music and you mute yourself, what I need to do is show you Alan King's book. It's called Crooked Smiling Light.
No way. I'm gonna get that right now.
Yeah. And you
where
can
do you buy
find
it? On Amazon?
I don't know where you can get it, but I know you can get it. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
And you go to his website, and I'll say something else.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Doug Rollins and Teresa Maychuk have a book called Bamboo Bridge, and so you should get that book too. All right. Okay. Now we're gonna stop talking. We're gonna stop talking.
I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay. It's fine. But we're gonna move to music now. All right. So sit back and enjoy. And I will now turn it over to Brent and Carter.
Thank you all so much. And thank you, Carter, for that. It has been amazing to work with the students here. This is my first year here at CSM, and it's just working with some really amazing talent, as you can see. Like the composition skills, Carter's getting ready to start a composition club that's going to be, that I'll be helping to sponsor. And we just have so many really young composers and great performers, and it's just, it's an honor. So I figured the piece that we'll be doing actually is an impromptu. We'll be improvising it for you right now. And we have a loose structure, kind of, but it's in the style that I was really trained in, which is flamenco. So this is called Flamenco del Falkenstein. That is it. Thank y'all so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brent and Carter.
That was amazing and beautiful. And thank you so much, the both of you. And thank you, Brent, for bringing your talent to CSM. I don't know how many here know Brent, but I know that Neil and I have just recently met him, and Carter as well. And I just think this is something that we've all been missing, and which is a big reason why I think Neil had this idea to have you join us for poetry and literature as a way to sort of welcome you and to bring music back to this experience. So it's just amazing. And what talent, Carter, that both of you, but I have to acknowledge the students.
Please.
So thank you so much. And I hope that this is something we can do in person starting in the fall and back on the La Plata campus, and we can spread it around the campuses, and so that we can all see each other and approach each other and have conversations. So thank you so much. It's just wonderful.
Thank you, and thank you all so much for having us. It's lovely.
Yes, and I'm so seriously hug deprived that I certainly hope we can be on campus next time. Keep our fingers crossed.
Great, thank you all so much.
I think it's time to see an image. So Diane, would you mind talking to us about your contribution to the spring magazine?
Yes, thank you, everybody. Yes, so this photo was actually taken a couple years ago. I came across it when I was going through different images to submit for the spring, and it just hit me. I was like, why haven't I submitted this before? It was like a hidden treasure, a mystery in itself. I believe, again, it was taken in 2014. I was down in Washington, DC, walking around, looking at the different memorials by myself, and just taking in awe, and just walking through, just taking time with myself. And I noticed when I came across the Vietnam Memorial that the medal and the piece of the uniform was just sitting there, and I don't know who it belongs to. It's a mystery, and I just wanted to capture that in that moment, that someone would leave something behind like that to share with anybody walking by, and just find it very commendable. And just wanted to capture that moment in time.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Neil.
Okay, let's move on to Jen Polhemus and Lynn Polhemus.
I'm going to let Lynn talk first because she's much more of an artist than I am. If she,
I wouldn't say that, Jennifer.
okay, we'll fight about it later.
Yeah. I do love taking photographs, and I love what I see in photo, and sometimes it creates a certain mood or feeling for me. So I'll take photographs of all kinds of odd things. But in this particular photograph that I took of one of the wild horses or ponies on Assateague Island, it was the day Jennifer and I went to pick up the ashes of our sister, who one of her last wishes was to go to Ocean City and make a sandcastle. So we were trying to fulfill that dream for her. And after losing her on the second trip we took, we decided to drive through Assateague Park, and it made us think about a lot of the memories we had as children, where my dad worked for the National Park Service, and we would always take vacations each year at national parks. And we remember times that we were there as children, and I just thought about how wonderful it was for the horses to have a place reserved for them to be free and to just live naturally for them. And I thought about my sister too, and she was born with a disability. She had a developmental disability with Down syndrome, and my parents always wanted her to live to her full potential, getting her schooling and getting her interested in things that she enjoyed. And it was kind of a little memory time.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you so much for paying attention to things that, again, I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but so many people, go through.
Thank you.
And they don't notice stuff, right? So that picture of that horse with its head down, you could have driven right past it or walked right past it and not clicked that photograph. But you did. And we're all, I believe we're all the better for it. So thank you, Lynn. Thank you.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful, and it's a lovely poem. So the poem next to it, a student of mine wrote in my 1020 class. And I think it's very fitting to be beside it. It's lovely. Both on the Chesapeake, both poems take place on the, or the image and the poem take place on the Chesapeake, so.
Hey, Rachel.
Should I stop now?
No. Since your student could not make it this evening, would you mind reading that poem?
Oh, please, Rachel, please read it.
Oh, sure. So this is an assignment that I do for my 1020 class, my English 1020 class. And I have them do what I call a connection to poetry assignment. And they, instead of just kind of diving into whatever the anthology has, or because many of them come with a stigma attached to poetry. So I try to let them, for the first assignment with poetry, sort of explore on their own and find ways to connect with poetry in a very organic way. And so I have them sort of search poems on Poetry Foundation and just any way, Instagram, any way that they sort of know how to do, probably better than I do these days. And then at the end of that, once they find that, at the end of that, I have them write a mimic poem. And so Fisk actually is he works on charter boats in Chesapeake Beach, and he's just an amazing student, a very dedicated student. And I had no idea the writer that he is. I know that he always writes excellent essays and turns in every assignment, but for this assignment, he really just went above and beyond and kept asking for help as well, and apparently keeps journals and writes all the time. So I was just, that's part of the job, right? As teachers, those of us who are teaching, when we find these things out about our students, it's like, okay, we can sleep well for the next, few months anyway, knowing that this is there. So this is Fisk Tyler, Waterbound. As I voyage the vast blue expanse, searching for a shoal, a great flock catches my glance, the riches beneath untold, a purity like no other, where sea transcends to sky to ease the labors of my mother. I must turn the sea red dye as I search for striper with tact and haste. I gripped my lance with great hyper for oil slicks I could taste. Oh, there's Fisk. And I did find out that he does help support his family with his what he does, and he's also a student, and he's an excellent student. So yeah, the story continues beyond his poetry. So very, very glad to have him in the magazine.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was beautiful.
Not just the poem, but the backstory, right? I mean, years ago, somebody asked me, how much do you want to know about your students' lives? And I said, everything. And they said, well, I don't know. I mean, some stuff, but when you learn that our students at the College of Southern Maryland do things like that, and it's not just they do it, but they document it and they take note of it, right? That's worth a lot. That's worth listening to. That's worth acknowledging. So thanks, Rachel, for that. Okay, Jennifer, can you read your poem, please?
Yes, I would be happy to. This poem is entitled February 15th. It is one in a series of poems that covers from the very beginning of December, when we learned that our sister's illness was terminal, to the 10 weeks and a little bit beyond that led up to her death. And I felt I was given a great gift to be able to witness her journey and to be able to set some of it to pen. And then I realized that my younger sister is the one who gave really the greatest gift. She gave her wit, she gave her love and her artistry and her compassion right up through the time that she closed her eyes and fell asleep and didn't wake up. And so I thank her, and I hope that she is pleased with the series that I wrote. But this is the last in the series, called February 15th. The wild horses of Assateague Island are running tonight. Beneath a full moon, they carry our sister home. We sit with her body, cooling now, going pale, and the horses snort and neigh her name. To a mysterious and endless sea they bring her, leaving the sheltered bay behind. Two attendants from Eastern Shore Cremation Services cover her body with a green and white checkered blanket. We feel like a picnic on a rainy day. And when the sun rises, dancing fire across the water, we begin our grieving with patient smiles.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, I love that. Further, I love the whole piece. You know, I think it's a beautiful tribute to your sister. And but you know, the line that's like, you know, lingering in my head is like this: the sunrise and dancing the fire along the water.
Yeah.
Beautiful line.
Thank you, Alan. That means a lot to me.
Thank you.
I like that line too. And also the image of the horses running under the full moon. That's beautiful too.
And I like the way you compared it to the picnic, you know, the picnic blanket, because I tend to make light of my most uncomfortable things. So I thought that was a beautiful way to interpret it.
Thank you, Diane.
We'll just give a moment for Jennifer and Lynn's sister.
I actually like the part snorting her name. Sometimes when they play and they make their sounds, it makes you think of other things, other people, other places.
And I want to thank Lynn for being the guinea pig who was the first to hear all of these as they came out and offered such good suggestions for me. And Neil too. Neil was the second eye on them. So it meant a lot to be able to share that with very close people.
And Jennifer, you should share them more. You're an amazing writer. You always have been. And I know that Neil shares that same sentiment with me. And I think it's time. I don't know what you do with your poetry, but maybe the next conversation you have with Neil could be about that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'd love to pick his brain for publication details. I've got 4 chapbooks, just, you know, small representation of work that I'm very pleased with. I think the publisher did a great job with them. But it would be nice to share it with more people, to share the incredible woman that my younger sister was, and other things that I've taken poetic snapshots of over time.
Well, it turns out the wonderful woman that you are, whom I have known for almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
And yeah. Well, now we're dating ourselves.
Right.
But I knew so long ago there was something very special in your ability to convey emotions and feelings and thoughts like that. You're careful with the choice of words. you're careful with line breaks, you're careful with stanza breaks. Like you've got and you know, for all these years, we've been trying to, you know, share that with as many people as we possibly can. So what I can say is that this video will be up and ready to go, as I said at the beginning, in the next couple of weeks. And so I would recommend and encourage people to, you know, find a link and please, you know, share Jennifer's work, because she's an incredible poet. Doug.
Hey, Jennifer, I don't know if you know about the self-publishing house called Lulu in North Carolina, LULU.
I don't, but I do now.
Yeah, and it's there's no money needed up front. You can put together a book, submit it to them, and then they'll charge you for the print cost. You look at it, and then they'll print out a whole bunch. And they put out stuff through Amazon and other places, but you can self-publish and then sell them yourself. That's what I do. It's a great organization.
I'm definitely going to check that out, Doug. Thank you for the
Cool.
tip.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I just, since we're passing gratitude and platitude around, I know all of you know how incredible Neil is, but honest to God, I wouldn't have been able to make it through some things in my life had it not been for Neil. I wouldn't have been able to graduate had it not been for Neil and some of my other professors that really cared about me as a person when devastation, you know, came to visit my doorstep. And just the friendship that he has shared and the creative camaraderie that he has been just so forthcoming and pouring out. I can't thank you enough for first your friendship, Neil, and also for your creative eye.
Okay.
Very well put, Janet.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we're both blessed, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we can't forget that. Thank you, Jen. I appreciate your contribution and your words and your acknowledgement of me, which I don't always think is really fundamental. But because I know that you would have done what you've done even had I never come into your life.
But it wouldn't have been the way it went down without you, Neil. So I'm not going to let you talk your way out of it. You're just gonna have to say thank you. I know it's hard for you to take. I do know that. But it's important to be said.
Hey, Jennifer, here's a sexist statement. Men don't know how to take compliments.
It's very easy. You just say thank you, and then you move on.
Nah, it's hard. It's hard.
I'm going to say thank you, and we're going to move on.
There you go.
Thank you, Jen.
Just tell him you like his beard.
Oh, well, okay.
That was a half-hearted. Okay.
Well, I can't see it well enough yet. I'll tell you. I'll tell you when I see you in person.
I just got tired of shaving. It's very simple.
It's a good reason.
Enough. All right. We have one more incredible poet for this evening. And her name is Teresa May Chuck. And she came with Doug Rollins about a month ago. And I feel also very, very grateful and blessed to have her with us. So Teresa, if I could turn it over to you.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me okay? I just want to make sure.
We can.
You can hear me okay. Okay. And I just plugged in my headphones too. Happy Teacher Appreciation Week. You, Neil, Rachel, Wayne, Doug, you're all so amazing. And it's been great just listening to you and listening to your students and seeing how you nurture each other. And it's just a beautiful thing. Thank you for inviting me to read and to be a part of this reading. Thank you to all the readers and everyone in attendance right now. I'll read my poem from the book. So as Doug mentioned earlier about Agent Orange, it greatly affected a lot of Vietnamese people, the land. It's still in the water system, so newborns are still being born with the effects of Agent Orange. It affects the genetics for generations and generations. My partner's sister, she passed away when she was about 16 years old. She was on dialysis, and her father was a veteran in the American War in Vietnam, a US soldier. This poem is called Agent Orange. It is difficult to be alone without a mother's touch in a crib like a baby, except one is not. A son taught to live with a thirst for a mother who loves her child, though one of his legs is too short, the other too long. He sits, arms bent and limp, but do not avoid him. He wants to interact. His swollen eyes and misshapen head leans back. In a dream, mother holds him close as if by her embrace alone, she will somehow right the wrong. The chemical traveled through her placenta to the womb, where small limbs that needed to form couldn't, where the tiny body the size of a fist no longer knew what to do. It was named for the orange band around each 55-gallon drum, orange as a sunrise that permeates one's soul, how its rays cover the sky and the earth with a deep orange, rising as those bodies also rise. I wanted to read one more, if that's okay.
Please do.
It's called Chernobyl Necklace. And what that is during the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, a lot of people developed thyroid cancer in the area, and they had to have their thyroid removed. So there was a scar around their neck, and that's how people were able to identify those that were affected by the nuclear disaster. Chernobyl Necklace. The scar is the pink horizon, sunset at the ocean. Each tree still standing in the red forest carries the story in its rings. Blind birds sing, calling to their mates. Broken glass, a plastic doll, the inanimate survive. How many more Aprils will that day be remembered? On my body grow mushrooms that could kill. Out of my heart runs a six-legged deer.
I really love, if that's the right word, in both those poems, the way you take, you play those terrible images, those terrible effects against natural beauty. And that makes us think of that natural beauty, and it makes it the effects of it that much worse.
Thank you, Wayne, for putting into words what I do. I appreciate that, because that will help me when I reflect.
Teresa, can I make a request? Could you read that your rainforest poem?
My rainforest poem? Sure.
Sorry to along the same lines of what you're reading. This is the poem that somebody sent me. My introduction to Teresa was this poem, and I just said, "Wow."
So the war affected not only people, but also the land and the plants and the animals. And this poem is about that. The decade the rainforest died, The deer did not stop running. Leopards climbed into trees that could not hide them. The Duglanker and the white-cheeked gibbon cursed at the metal gods we flew, raining on them as they burned from napalm. Elephants choked on the smoke of gunpowder and poison, their steps a strange rhythm as they tried to fly. The thunder of bombs echoed the steps of elephants. Tigers exploded as they stepped onto landmines. In a forest covered with leaves, dead from Agent Orange, fallen trees, and decomposing bodies of animals and people. The earthworms were washed away in monsoons with soil that could no longer grab onto roots. The Javan rhinoceros and the wild water buffaloes that were still alive wandered aimlessly. Weary with M16s and AK-47s, we marched quietly and steadily, not knowing why we were killing each other.
Thank you, Doug, for asking Teresa to read that poem.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So I guess it comes down to being celebratory of life itself, which I think we've done for the past hour and a half, and be, you know, thankful for the lives that we have and that we've had, and maybe even something like trying to make a difference in our own lives about, you know, not, as Wayne has told me many, many times, just recreating that cycle of violence and misery and being cognizant of the fact that there is beauty in our lives. I have some lavender growing, and when I saw the buds coming up and out at this time of year, and the roses and the azaleas, it's not, you know, it's not insignificant. And I think that what we've done this evening is to remind ourselves that small things and beauty and pain and joy and love are not insignificant. So I want to thank each and every one of you for coming this evening and for sharing your gift with each of us.